Hey everyone, welcome to Reddistry. If you love wild Reddit stories like crazy cheating tales, spooky scary stories to fall asleep to, or just need something to relax with, you're in the right place. We've got a new Reddit stories compilation for you every week, so make sure to like, comment, and hit that subscribe button. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Let's get into it. Sharing. It would be a lie to say that we didn't know that we were making a mistake once we started. There's a world of difference between not knowing if you're doing something wrong and not knowing what you're doing wrong. And after all, we did summon a demon. We didn't think it would work, of course. Laminia, Lord of Transformation and Promise, was only mentioned on one glitchy little website. We were being stupid little edgelords when we followed the directions next to the square that promised to load Laminia's image any day now. But with the sharp smell of fireworks, the air around us twinged, and there he was. Describing Laminia is pointless. He never stayed as one thing for too long. He was beautiful and ugly, young and old, human and anything but. And with a voice that made my eyes hurt, he spoke. "Are you here to help each other transform into something better? I can help with that. Stronger, smarter, faster, prettier. Whatever you wish, whenever you wish. But you may never go back on your improvements." I couldn't speak. Do we go to hell if we do this?" June asked. 10 minutes before, none of us believed in hell. Now it seemed like it was probably a given. "Not necessarily. Only you can judge what you do with this gift." Laminia waved his hand. "The jewelry you all share. Touch it and decide what you want to improve. You can always decide to do nothing." Then he was gone. It took us a moment to figure out what our shared jewelry was, but he was referring to the wristbands we wore from a recent music festival. "Well, I'm trying it," Daniel said. He stood up and walked to the wall, swiping a pencil off the desk as he did so. He drew a line over his head to show his current height, and then announced, "I wish I was 1 inch taller." The effect was instant. June and I walked over to us and were thrilled until Ava joined us. Ava used to be exactly the same height as June, but now she was clearly shorter. "Give it back," she insisted. Daniel tried, but nothing worked. Ava threatened to wish herself taller, but June and I pointed out that as we'd been told that we couldn't undo our wishes, then Daniel was probably the only one of us that height couldn't come from. We could have left it there. But a week later, Ava had an important musical audition, and the way she saw it, none of the rest of us played an instrument anyway, and we did kind of owe her. We agreed that a wish like that would be okay, and to be honest, I'm not even sure which one of us the talent was taken from. Daniel made a similar plea another week after that as the only one of us who played sports. If we picked one thing each, we could all be exceptional. He argued, "We just can't all have the same thing. We could take it little by little, just that nothing we take is hurting anybody else." It was too tempting to refuse. Ava wanted to take more musical talent, I wanted to do better academically, and after a little thought, June said she'd want to be beautiful. We were cautious in the beginning, but it seemed like it was going to work. None of us were ever going to succeed in the areas that were being taken from us, but by enhancing our natural strengths, we were more successful than we ever could have been alone. The athlete, the musician, the scholar, and the model, there were a few years where our deal seemed set to help us achieve our wildest dreams. That was until Ava died. We were told that the car crash had killed her instantly. I don't know if I would have grown any suspicions that Ava's reaction times decreased at the exact time that Daniel had a major game, but in the end, I didn't have to. Daniel admitted that what he'd done as soon as he realized it himself. All he'd wanted was to be able to react a little faster, and he was horrified that the small amount he took was enough to impair Ava when she was behind the wheel. We all agreed that we needed to stop. I don't know how long we all actually kept that promise. I can tell you that it was only 1 week before I started to suspect that one of us was breaking it. My hair started to fall out, not terrifying amounts, but more than the usual stray hairs I'd find about, and I started to feel physically weaker than before Ava's death. I knew that both of these things could be explained away by grief, but that explanation just didn't sit right with me perhaps, because I'd already been beginning to wonder if we'd been too hasty to swear off our new abilities outright. I don't know how long we all actually kept that promise. I can tell you that it was only 1 week before I started to suspect that one of us was breaking it. My hair started to fall out, Not terrifying amounts, but more than the usual stray hairs I'd find about, and I started to feel physically weaker than before Ava's death. I knew that both of these things could be explained away by grief, but that explanation just didn't sit right with me perhaps, because I'd already been beginning to wonder if we'd been too hasty to swear off our new abilities outright. "Just stop," Daniel texted me after weeks of me wishing for intelligence. "Bit by bit, I won't tell June if you stop now." The text made me reason that Daniel hadn't been taking anything from us, and I did feel a little bad for him having his thinking power sapped away and getting nothing in return. I told myself that I probably shouldn't continue taking from him forever, but there was always a reason that it wasn't quite the right time to stop. Hell, there was always a reason that it was the worst time I could think of to stop. "You promised," June texted eventually. "If you lied, then I'm making wishes too." June was never the smartest of people, and some of what I'd taken had obviously been drained from her over the years. So I was almost impressed when I saw her response. She couldn't choose which one of us she took from, but she could wish for things that mattered more to me. Daniel had been shaving his head for a year now, so hair loss would hurt me more than him. Likewise, regularly keeping my nails long and painting them with cheap polish was the closest thing I had to caring about my appearance. But a day after her text, every single nail was weak enough to break. I made a couple more wishes to out of spite, and just like that, the floodgates were opened. The sad thing is that with the benefit of hindsight, I think I was the reason that Daniel started taking from me in June again. He'd seemed so genuinely upset about Ava and didn't initially go back on his word, but I don't think it was only an emotional response for him. He knew full well we were on track to destroy each other, but once I asked for my reasoning skills to get better, that ended up taken from him. Within a month, Daniel and I went from below average looks to looking like human waxworks. My energy levels were low enough that I was seeing a doctor for medical tests I knew would come back negative, and June had to leave a television show she'd been cast in due to health issues. As for what I'd taken when Daniel had met up with a bunch of old friends for drinks one night the next day, I got a message from one asking if Daniel had suffered from a concussion. "I don't know." I'd replied, "We aren't friends anymore." I wonder now if I could have made them stop if I'd stopped too. I was smart enough to form excellent arguments on paper, so maybe I could have come up with the perfect way to phrase things to June and Daniel as to why we really had to stop this time. But the sad thing is, I never tried. I did wonder how to convince them to stop, without also stopping on a daily basis, but in order to hide taking intelligence from them, I'd need to take either so little that it was almost pointless, or enough that they'd never figure out what I'd done, which would essentially be a lobotomy. Being ugly can't directly kill you, but a lack of energy can. June fainted in her shower and cracked her head open, doubling Daniel's kill count in one swift action. None of us really spoke anymore, so when I read about June's death online, I realized that it was unlikely that Daniel had heard about this much earlier than I had, if at all. What would you have done if you were me? Would you have waited to see it you'd die next? The first thing I did was wish for a lot of intelligence. General intelligence, verbal reasoning, logic, insight. Any type of intelligence I could think of I wished for, and wished to improve it by as much as possible. I ordered an Uber to his house, and blathered through any wishes I could think of in the backseat like a crazy person until I reached my destination. His door wasn't locked, thankfully, as I'd have been too weak to break inside. The television was on, and I crept towards it quietly. Daniel stared at the screen, blankly as I approached, and I pulled the knife from my pocket. The festival bracelet that allowed Daniel to make wishes cut easily despite my unsteady hand. He looked at me and I waited for anger, but there was just nothing. I don't think he knew who I was, or even that he should have been alarmed by a stranger sat near him with a knife. "I'm sorry," I said, and for the first time in a long time, I really was. I rested on the floor for a few moments more before dragging myself away. This was all decades ago now. Daniel is still alive as far as I know. I had to leave academia due to health concerns and overwhelming guilt in how I'd managed to achieve success there, but before you take that as some sort of karma, you should probably know that I was able to find a different job that, whilst less exciting, actually paid more. Life isn't fair. Death, though, the older I get, the more I fear that death might be very fair indeed. The thing that we summoned had strongly suggested that some sort of hell exists. Ava died before we really started hurting each other, so maybe she'll avoid it. But I'm not so sure about June. and Daniel, and I know that I am worse than both of them. The worst thing is that when I find myself thinking this, there is always one thought that sneaks in alongside the guilt that I still know where my bracelet is and could still use it to take what remains from Daniel's lifespan away from him, just so that I can avoid hell for a little longer.